This is the Harry Potter series. Today we're going to be diving into the entire contents of the first book in the 7-book series. We're going to talk, yes, about the movies, but mostly about the intricacies of the book, the metaphor, the illustrations, and, of course, the author and her hidden or not-so-hidden messaging. Before we can begin any conversation about plot, we must first discuss the title. The book was originally published in the UK in 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. When it was published by Scholastic in the United States in 1998, the title had been changed to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. That's because Scholastic didn't think American audiences would be able to handle the word philosopher. They thought they'd be really disinterested in that. Or philosophy didn't sound magical enough to American audiences. So that's where we get the two-title discrepancy. Something else that feels really relevant to the publishing story is that the K in JK Rowling doesn't stand for anything. Joanne Rowling had to publish her books under what she considered a pseudo-pseudonym because publishers didn't think that science fiction or fantasy written by women at that time would again be widely accepted or desirable to audiences. So JKR doesn't stand for anything. It's just meant to mask the womanliness of her actual name, Joanne. I think keeping in mind the misogyny that J.K. Rowling faced in her time is relevant as we dissect not only the problematic themes, characters, or messages of her body of work, but also as it relates to the TERFdom that she's espousing today. We will get there. Throughout the course of this video and the 6 videos to follow, we're going to break down the entirety of the Harry Potter series, what makes these books so beloved and what made them feel timeless, and why so many of us felt home in Hogwarts when it's clear that upon re-examination of the text, the signs about its authorship were always there. This is the Harry Potter series. Let's do it. The night of. In the dead of night, on October 31st in 1981, an insolent and damaged boy in the body of an adult man named Tom Riddle enters the home of 21-year-old Lily and James Potter and their 1-year-old son, Harry. In 1981, in the suburbs of London, wizards and witches have existed and thrived in secret, under the noses of their muggle or non-magical neighbors. Muggle in Harry Potter is wizard for non-magical people. You know that. Wizards have kept themselves secret in an effort to safeguard their magic from the typically aggressive, fearful, and demanding and entitled muggle population. That's us. We're the humans. I don't disagree with any of those adjectives. It's just a bummer to be on this side. So because muggles tend to fear things they don't understand, magical people have decided that they will keep themselves locked away. The wizarding population, through their own government, administration, and legislation, remain in secret because they are a significantly smaller population than the muggles. The International Statute of Secrecy from 1692 is meant to keep wizards from being preyed upon by their human counterparts. They believe that humans would demand magical solutions to their problems. They believe that they would intimidate the smaller wizarding population, and ultimately believe that it's impossible to exist peacefully with their muggle counterparts. So the wizards and witches exist in a sort of underground society, but very much next to the non-magical people around them. Lily and James Potter, despite their youth, were regarded as strong and powerful Aurors, which are dark wizard fighters. They were astoundingly wealthy and well connected to the leadership of the Resistance at that time, the Order of the Phoenix. The Resistance was founded by Albus Dumbledore to organize forces for good against Tom Riddle, who has embarrassingly made an anagram of his name and now insists on being called Lord Voldemort. Riddle has assembled an army of dangerous creatures, dementors, werewolves, and giants, all known in the wizarding world for their violence, which is obviously problematic in itself. Why is the entire species known for being violent? We're gonna get into all of it. So Tom Riddle, now Lord Voldemort, has assembled an army that engages in acts of extreme cruelty, aggression, and humiliation in a quest for worldwide muggle oppression and enforcement of a new order of wizard superiority. Tom Riddle seems to believe, or is certainly espousing, this idea that pure-blood wizards are superior to not just non-magical people or muggles, but also to their half-blood counterparts, other wizarding people that don't have pure blood, read inbred lines of ancestry. We'll come to understand Tom Riddle a lot more throughout the timeline of this series, but it's clear that his desire to oppress is born out of his own feelings of inferiority. His insistence on pure blood superiority, meaning wizards who are born of and have exclusively mated with other wizards, is so transparently insecurity, grasping at straws, anything to feel okay with the fact that daddy does not love him. Legitimately. We'll get there. So Tom Riddle, in the fall of 1981, under his alias Sirius has been wreaking havoc in the wizarding world for the last 10 years. While forces have certainly, yes, been assembling to fight his violence, damage has been done, people are being killed, and the wizarding community is bleeding and in dire need of help. So Tom Riddle, on that fated night in 1981, has intention to murder the child Harry Potter, believing him to be a boy mentioned in a prophecy uttered by Sybil Trelawney in Hogshead Pub, predicting, this is important, that Tom Riddle will be unsuccessful in his quest for world domination as long as the boy who goes unnamed, as long as this specific boy is alive. Trelawney, in her prediction, does not mention Potter by first or family name. She merely refers to the child as the boy born in the end of July of 1980, and there were two of those at the time. Of course, Harry Potter and also Neville Longbottom. In the ultimate Freudian slip, Riddle assumes baby Potter, which is just ridiculous, to be the bigger threat, despite the fact that Potter's mother is Muggle-born. The slur for magical people that are born of non-magical parents is mudblood, as in dirty blood. Despite the fact that baby Longbottom comes from a long line of wizards and witches, Riddle chooses baby Potter. We're going to talk about all of this in extreme depth, fear not, as this information comes to light for the characters, but I just have to lay the groundwork. Okay, Riddle somehow finds the safe house location of the Potters and murders first the father of the boy. James Potter puts up the fight of his life to defend his young family. Upon recognizing the death of her spouse, with no protection and unable to execute any further defensive maneuvers, Lily Potter throws herself in front of her 1-year-old child. At the same time that Riddle fires the last curse he will fire for over a decade. He fires his last killing curse. And because Riddle doesn't understand love or family or connection or loyalty, he cannot anticipate what will happen next. He doesn't know that love is more powerful than even the worst of the 3 unforgivable curses. Something that we will come to understand throughout the series is that Lily Potter's sacrifice will invoke a powerful protective magic. Her sacrifice shields baby Harry mostly from the curse, causing it to rebound upon its caster. The growing tyrant and murderer disappears. And after 11 years of torment at his hands, the wizarding world initially goes quiet, and then they start to celebrate because their big threat, their big bad, has been effectively felled by a baby. No one knows for certain how the baby managed to destroy the threat, but he escaped with just a scar, lightning-shaped, on his forehead. Lily Potter, the now hero's mother, like I mentioned, was Muggle-born, meaning both her parents were non-magical people. But regardless of her origins, she is regarded as one of the most powerful and intelligent and compassionate witches of her time. It is remarked upon multiple times throughout the series that any proof of wizarding bloodline contributing to more powerful magic or any sort of legitimate superiority is literally cut in half by the existence of Lily Potter because she's that impressive of a witch. Wizarding blood and the dilution of the bloodline, like, it's literally all bullshit. Like, none of it's real. It's complete hogwash. It's not real. It's not real. It's really not real. That same night, baby Harry Potter, now orphaned, is gently transported from the safe and warm life he had shared with his parents and is abruptly dropped off in the now safer Muggle world. Albus Dumbledore, wizarding mastermind, slated for leadership and roles of government, and head of the most prestigious wizarding school, Hogwarts, enacts a plan to keep the now orphan child safe. And let me just say, enormous air quotes around the word safe, okay? We're gonna come to understand why Dumbledore does what he does, who or what he was willing to sacrifice, what war and defeat of darkness cost the light, but I don't think any social worker would call baby Harry Potter safe in the hands that he is left in, or in the home that he is raised in. Dumbledore, through threat and coercion, it is later revealed, places the boy with his Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. Aunt Petunia is the Muggle sister to Lily Potter. Dumbledore has to threaten the family to take the boy because they're averse to all things wizard, certainly, but also all things disorderly, all things cool, all things whatever. They believe the wizarding world to be filled with freaks and good for nothings. It's just made up prejudice that has nothing to do with wizards and everything to do with these two people and where they think they belong in society. So let's talk about the Dursleys. So the night after Harry Potter's family has been murdered, Hagrid is tasked with bringing the baby on Sirius Black's motorcycle. And that is on the first page. And we don't hear Sirius Black's name again until Prisoner of Azkaban. And so I'm gonna be I'm going to be wrestling with the text and wrestling with the author and what she has revealed to us through her tweets and through the legislation that she has decided to support. That there's something very satisfying about the way that this series is thought out. It's clear that the author was having fun with it, or seemed to understand the importance of the world she was building and the continuity that needed to exist there in order for it to feel real for whatever audience was consuming it. As consumers, we want all artists to engage with their art in this way, but they don't. That's one of the things that makes Harry Potter Harry Potter. So anyway, baby Harry and Hagrid, they are met by Albus Dumbledore, of course, and also Minerva McGonagall. She is a teacher at Hogwarts and eventually head of Gryffindor House. She is extremely skilled in the magical art of transfiguration, which is noted to be one of the most challenging skills that a witch or wizard can practice. And she has spent the day watching the Dursleys, kind of unauthorized. She's doing her own recon when dropping the baby, wrapped in a blanket, with a note in an extremely inane suburb of London. She warns Dumbledore, "You can't mean that you are going to leave this boy with the people who live here." She believes these particular human muggles, Petunia and Vernon Dursley, are horrible, about as bad as they come. The worst of the worst. They care much about appearing normal, the same as all the others. They've stripped themselves of personality, their home of warmth. Their lives are completely devoid of color. More than that, they have been estranged from Petunia's sister, Lily Potter, because they believe her and her skills, her talents and ambitions, and her husband and her world to be an outright abomination. Their biggest fear is their neighbors and colleagues discovering their association with these people, the wizards. It's obviously flawed logic. None of it makes any sense. If we were to do a deep dive on the psyche of Vernon Dursley, that would be really boring. And this first book opens from the perspective of Vernon Dursley, and it is so goddamn boring. The book starts with Vernon raging at a young couple across the street. He's in his car and they are dressed in cloaks. And he's furious to see people dressed in a way that chafes against his sense of propriety. I know. Okay, so to talk about Harry Potter, we have to talk about transphobia, because JK Rowling in June of 2020, when things felt like they couldn't get much worse, little did we know, JKR took to the internet and has since made the eradication of trans folks her main mission. Okay, so let's talk about it. JKR outed herself as a TERF. A TERF is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. TERFs mostly advocate for the exclusion of trans women from women's spaces, even though trans women are women, and for trans folks not to be protected under the same rights that women are protected under, flimsy as they are. JKR seems to really believe, or she insists, that she is a progressive and liberal white woman merely doing her duty to the feminist movement, that this is a witch hunt, that she's being attacked for her beliefs, for speaking out against trans ideology, which she believes is an ideology designed to erase and harm women. So I'm a person who believes in human rights and has always advocated for liberal policy. That being said, in my ignorant youth, I had questions that I understood to be transphobic. It's okay to have bigoted questions. We've all internalized the hatred built into our system, at least somewhat. And acknowledging these socially ingrained prejudices is the first step to dispelling yourself of these bigoted ideas. So in short, it's okay to have bigoted questions. It's not okay to use those bigoted questions to fortify your fearful beliefs. JKR, despite her seemingly brilliant and politically active and liberal body of work, seems to have fallen prey to the typical right-wing propaganda. In the last 100 years or so, the right has routinely relied on fear politics, taking a legitimate issue, the harm and erasure of women, something that is actually happening, and attributing the pain that women and society are experiencing to a marginalized group of people, despite the fact that that oppression is definitely being perpetuated by the people with the power, not the people without it. That's bigotry. Of course, women are being assaulted, not by trans folk, by men. Of course, women are and have always been erased, not by trans folk, but under patriarchy, by men. Right-wing women are directing their very real and valid fear away from the perpetrators of that violence, the men in and around their most intimate family and world systems, husbands and fathers and teachers, and instead directing that fear toward a chosen threat. So if you have transphobic thoughts or questions, I encourage you to do your research. Bigotry is typically dispelled with education, which is what makes JKR such an interesting case study. And one of the reasons that real thought leaders in our current time have taken to having what they assume to be good faith conversations with her, because a lot of us believing that if we could just sit down with JKR and explain to her what might actually be going on, a lot of this could be avoided. But maybe not, right? Like maybe that's not giving her enough credit. Maybe that's me infantilizing a beloved author so that I can continue to engage with the work that she created without having to fully acknowledge that perhaps she's in league with the Death Eaters? Like, okay. So JKR, because she's had many conversations, many people have tried to educate JKR, and it's been 6 years, and she's only doubled down. She's revealed herself to be an willfully prejudiced person on purpose. This was a really shocking and heartbreaking development, because an entire generation grew up with Harry Potter and Hogwarts as a means of escape from all of the horribleness. More than that, the main messaging is love wins. Above all, that prejudice is ignorant. And it's impossible to read the Dursleys and not think of JKR's transphobic tweets. And much in line with the truth of her beloved series, she proves to us that the world is not split into good people and Death Eaters. We all have light and dark inside of us. JKR shared with us her light, and unfortunately now she won't shut up about her darkness. And honestly, upon reread, in today's current political climate, the signs really were there. This text, despite its core themes and overall messaging, is really littered with prejudice and fear. It's also rich, right? That she's such an advocate for women when her writing makes it clear. This series regularly depicts our unlikable women characters as unattractive. Girls are routinely depicted using love potion on crushes, drugging their male classmates to be with them, because women are super known for this behavior, right? One of the main critiques of this work prior to all of this happening in 2020 was that it's really obvious in the writing that there's a very specific way to be a girl in this Harry Potter universe that does not evoke disdain from the author or the characters around them. Being girly or feminine is something that JKR sneers at through her protagonists' behavior and rhetoric. And like I said, it does matter that these books were published in 1997 and that JKR herself faced a lot of prejudice or oppression as it relates to being a woman. It was not easy for her to amass success the way that it would have been if she had been a man. Her books probably would have been published earlier. She may have been paid more, X, Y, or Z. So perhaps her excluding in trans women, you can't just decide to be a woman. Maybe that's about gatekeeping. Maybe that's about I went through it and you didn't. But that's, again, ignorant, because trans folk face more prejudice and more hardship, less protected than almost anyone else, and they are the most likely population to experience sexual violence. So this battle that she's decided to fight, this issue that she's going to war for, that she's putting her inordinate power and privilege and fan base toward this specific issue, is legitimately confusing and so awful. A lot of trans folk and members of the LGBTQ community found safe passage in Hogwarts. We are going to talk more about this, some of the characters that we thought JKR was alluding to queerness with, some of the storylines, some of the skills, and all of that. We're going to dive into it. I'm bringing this up at the top though, because it's important to remember as HBO launches its remake of the original series, JKR directs her enormous wealth towards anti-trans legislation, and she is having an impact. She has been successful in decreasing the rights of trans people in the UK and Scotland. So if you're going to support this author, you should know that it may be your hard-earned money going toward the harm of people that we love, that I love. Anyway, so the reason that Dumbledore decides to drop the now orphaned Harry off at the Dursleys is twofold. Is because Harry is now a legend, an icon, if you would. There's not a child in the world that won't know his name. Dumbledore argues that growing up famous and revered may corrupt the boy. Now, I gotta believe there was a better option than the Dursleys. Anything but this, because let me detail the conditions at the Dursleys for you. Harry does not grow up safe in the Dursley home. Over the next 10 years, he is neglected, intimidated, threatened, and manipulated. He often goes unfed. He is never properly dressed. He's never shown an ounce of affection or care. He's often confined to the cupboard under the stairs, which is where he lives. And he's put to work, often cooking and cleaning, and then denied access to the nourishment that he is preparing for his cousin and his aunt and uncle. He's bullied relentlessly by Petunia and Vernon Dursley. And eventually by his cousin Dudley, who's only a few weeks older than him. Dudley's favorite punching bag is Harry, but he can't often catch Harry because Harry's very fast. Harry has grown up small and skinny, probably due to malnourishment and regular confinement. Harry has been denied any and all information about his past and his parents, and thus himself. The Dursleys believe that access and understanding to Harry's wizarding history may activate the hopefully dormant magic gene inside of him. They are abusing him, keeping him from all love and joy because they don't want his magic to blossom, which implies that they know that magic is a product of love, or that love is necessary for magic. Rowling takes great care to describe the child Dudley Dursley's body to us. This series is literally rife with fat phobia. I think it's a little bit important to remember I'm not a Dudley Dursley stan, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But I do think it's important to remember that he is also a child that is a product of his environment, which is very much a toxic one. He's a child subject to the whims of what are clearly crazy adults. In fact, Rowling's depiction of the Dursleys' home clearly states that Petunia is fearful of her child's moods, and that his compulsive eating and entitled nature are literally enabled by the adults around him, who are supposed to be able to do the brave and courageous thing of teaching him emotion regulation and management, but they don't do that. They would prefer quiet. It's clear that catering to Dudley and keeping him from tantrum are the main objectives of the house. And Dudley is depicted deriving pleasure out of Harry's exclusion and abuse, always making sure to snatch up something that Harry really wants. And Dudley's often affronted when things go well for Harry or go Harry's way. That's a learned behavior. So the Dursleys have treated Harry as a burden and a threat, and their son has picked up on that. And thus, Dudley Dursley contributes to the family values in similar ways. This is very much still on the parents. Dudley Dursley is 11 years old and already an enormous bully who apparently beats up children a lot younger than him with his crew of other bullies. Like, this is also a child in need of saving, because this child's needs aren't being met either. Please know I am not excusing this bullying or his general spoiled kid nature. I also find him repulsive. I just think it's interesting that the author has gone to such lengths to make this child the center of the disgustingness going on in the Dursley household. I think that's interesting. We can psychologically recognize his dastardly behavior as merely a reflection of his shitty parents, aka emotionally immature parents that let their child's feelings drive the home. It's entirely plausible that the reason that Dudley becomes so upset when something goes positive for Harry is because his parents have demonstrated that behavior, working hard to derive Harry from experiencing anything positive because they recognize him experiencing something positive, like getting the piece of food that he wants, or, having a piece of hand-me-down clothing fit well. They recognize that as a threat to their internal system, because if he becomes a wizard, they think all of their security goes out the window. So it makes sense that Dudley is fighting for the same objective that his parents are. And I think it's interesting that it's so much grosser to witness it in Dudley's unchecked behavior than it is in his parents. And I think that has something to do with the perspective of the author. I also think that that highlights one of the other main themes of the book, which is individual accountability versus the system you grow up in. No one highlights this more, though, of course, than Draco Malfoy, who we will talk about. Where is the line? At what point in time must we evaluate our surroundings and the rhetoric that we are espousing to educate ourselves about whether or not what we believe is legitimately true and just? That's the point of the series. We're going to talk more about it. So in July of 1981, it's Dudley's birthday, and Harry is meant to stay at Mrs. Figg's, who's the neighbor across the way. Due to Mrs. Figg's broken leg, Harry is forced to accompany the family on the outing, much to everyone's chagrin. Harry is excited, delighted, but he keeps his emotions inside because he has learned that demonstrating joy in front of this family will likely result in them attempting to take it away. Harry and the Dursleys understand that strange things happen when Harry is around. He describes instances of ugly sweaters shrinking into oblivion, suddenly appearing on top of the school when being chased by Dudley and his gang of child thugs, his hair stubbornly and constantly remaining the same, despite many visits to the barber, and one graphic scene of Petunia aggressively clipping his hair to near baldness. And the hair just grows back. It just grows right back. Everyone's really furious about it. So Harry is inordinately punished for each of these strange occurrences, despite the fact that he really does not feel responsible for them. Dudley and Mr. Dursley are tapping on the glass of the zoo, and already every single one of their actions, from wanting to be normal, which is like not real, because nothing about being normal is legitimate. You're a human animal, I'm a human animal, and we're all just trying to cope with the horrifying chaos of what it is to be alive, even when things aren't that bad. The book acts as a sort of moral authority over its reader, and it works very hard to demonstrate what is correct or just behaviors through its characters. So we know that tapping on the glass isn't cool or kind, maybe because we have empathy and a little bit of compassion for animals who have been caged. Anyway, so they're tapping on the glass, disturbing a particularly large boa constrictor that has been bred in captivity, okay? The boa constrictor has been bred in captivity. We established that on page freaking 30. Once Dudley and Vernon walk away, Harry seems to be engaging in almost a conversation with the snake. And because Harry's engaging with the snake starts to move, and Dudley becomes excited and he pushes Harry out of the way. And suddenly, the glass separating the animal from the humans disappears, and Dudley and his friends fall into the enclosure. Despite the fact that the snake merely slithers away, thanking Harry on the way, the Dursleys demand profuse apologies from the confused zookeepers and spend the ride home describing the harrowing encounter with the dangerous animal. Like, to clarify, the Dudleys feel and see threat where there is none, and thus form a vendetta against the innocent. Like, okay. Anyway, Harry's blamed for the odd encounter. Despite him having no awareness or understanding of what has gone on, he's banished to the cupboard under the stairs with no meals in what he describes as his longest punishment ever. Next, we get the letter from Hogwarts. I just can't do it without 8 beverages. Summer holidays are coming to a close, and 10-year-old Harry is losing hope, no longer clinging to the fantasy that one day a loving, warm family will come and pluck him from this horrible oblivion. As Harry is coming to accept the fact that this may be the duration of his childhood, he receives a letter for the first time in his life, a piece of correspondence addressed to him. Harry is extremely isolated. He doesn't have any friends at school because Dudley will bully anyone that is nice to him. He's entirely isolated, and he's received a letter from Hogwarts, the first actual acknowledgement of him in his life. The Dursleys do everything they can to keep it from him. Vernon and Petunia freak out, and they burn Harry's letter. Just imagine how awful you have to be. I mean, like, already there's been a lot of awfulness. That specific letter is addressed to the cupboard under the stairs, and once it becomes acknowledged by the people at Hogwarts that Harry does in fact live in a cupboard under the stairs, the Dursleys relocate him to a legitimate bedroom. This bedroom had previously been used as storage for Dudley's unused and unwanted toys. So as soon as their shameful and disgusting behavior is acknowledged by someone they consider to have a certain authority, they make a change. It just implies that they very much know what they're doing is wrong. This begins a series of letters arriving, intended for Harry. The sender seems to be aware that Harry is not receiving them. The Dursleys continue to do everything they can, going to lengths, nailing their mailbox shut, not going to work. The letters become more and more obtrusive to the point where Vernon Dudley packs his entire family into a car, drives them to a boat, and has that boat take them to a remote island in hopes that they won't receive post there. The lengths that ignorant people will go to deny the reality of the situation is wild. So they're spending this evening in this cold, dank, dark place, hiding from the letters to keep Harry from his heritage and his life. Harry, at the moment he turns 11, at that exact moment he is rescued by Rubeus Hagrid, who blows through the door. Keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts has arrived to really kick off our story, bearing not only the letter from Hogwarts, inviting Harry to attend this prestigious wizarding school, and also a birthday cake. Harry's first. It's a chocolate cake. Other relevant pieces of information: Hagrid has an umbrella that doubles as a sort of magic conduit. It's not a magic wand, but it does perform magic. And he lights a fire in the hearth, and he feeds Harry a delicious meal. Hagrid has an extremely illuminating conversation with Harry, wherein he details the night of his parents' death, proclaims Harry a wizard, and scolds the Dursleys for being prejudiced, insecure pieces of shit. He also, because the Dursleys are being themselves the entire time that Hagrid is trying to have this moment with this traumatized child, Hagrid actually gives Dudley a pig tail, like the tail of a pig on his ass, because Hagrid, the part giant, also remarks on Dudley's size. Because JKR's writing is outrageously fatphobic, and you're going to find that littered throughout the text, and it's going to become perhaps more offensive as time goes on. The characterization of people that are bigger or described as plump or whatever, they're usually the more inept villains of the story, the less dangerous but extremely unpleasant characters. I think JKR is quite obviously drawing a line between competence, morality, and skinniness. And guess what? Guess freaking what? That's also something the conservative right has a tendency to do. Actually sounds like something the Dursleys would do. Initially, this is heartbreaking, Harry protests. He protests. He says, I think maybe you have the wrong kid. I don't think I'm a wizard. He's presented with his wildest dream, and he tries to hand it back because he thinks he's unworthy of it. So Harry finds out that his parents were not only semi-famous and practiced Aurors, they were also extremely wealthy. And thus, Harry has inherited an incredible amount of money. The previously impoverished kid that has never had his own piece of clothing, has never selected a piece of candy at a candy store, now becomes privy to an enormous vault of cash. So let's talk about poverty. JKR built a world wherein money seems perhaps unnecessary, and I'm going to continue to flush this out through the entirety of the series. Is this whole video just me saying, I'm gonna flush this out when we get there? But it feels important to mention at the top because it exists at the top. Okay, so we often see magic as a solution to many problems. That's one of the reasons that the wizards keep themselves secret. But we see pots and pans that clean themselves, practice wizards capable of apparition or teleportation, seemingly eradicating the need for transportation. We witness spells that can replicate material like food and clothing. We witness spells that can enlarge a space without any sort of detection. So the author's choice to include poverty, oppression, and the exclusionary class of the haves versus the have-nots in this particular way seems rooted in her unwillingness to imagine a world wherein magic means everyone has enough. What I'm saying is, we witness magic be a solution to scarce resources routinely throughout the series. So why the inclusion of something as trivial as currency? Especially because a lot of the purchasing outside of this first book does happen behind the scenes. The Wizarding Bank, Gringotts, that Hagrid takes Harry to in this first book and that Harry will return to at the conclusion of the series, seems mostly to be a plot device and, you guessed it, steeped in thinly veiled prejudice. Hagrid whisks Harry off to Gringotts Bank and tells him that he'd be mad to try to rob it. It's guarded by goblins and goblin magic and is thus impervious to deception of any kind. This will be important later. He presents Harry's family key to their vault and tells Griphook, the goblin they're working with, that he's there to collect something from Dumbledore's vault 713. Hagrid retrieves the mysterious item and Harry is exposed to his wealth for the first time. And from there, we as the reader get to enter Diagon Alley, which is just diagonally. But the whole series is filled with little like fun tidbits like that. It's kind of like Dickens-esque. Maybe it means that they aren't straight, right? Maybe it means that wizards go diagonal. And so the books can just be very satisfying in these ways. They just seem really thought out. So Harry is tasked with collecting his school supplies for his new school. And first he stops at the robe shop where he meets Draco Malfoy, who reveals himself to be immediately horrible and terrible. Draco immediately strongly reminds Harry of Dudley. Harry doesn't like bullies. Draco is very unabashed and demonstrates prejudice toward Hagrid for being half giant and exposes himself as a staunch, pure blood supporter. Harry gets out of that interaction without much consequence. Hagrid and Harry get ice cream. Hagrid answers a few questions about Quidditch and the Hogwarts houses. They buy Harry's books, cauldron, scales, and other school accoutrement. And then Hagrid buys Harry an owl, a birthday present. Next, they buy a magic wand. And this is notable because, as we all know, the wand chooses the wizard, which does bring up questions about wand sentience that we will get to later. And the wand that chooses Harry happens to be the sister wand to the very wand that killed his parents and gave him that scar. It's also revealed that Hagrid had previously been expelled from Hogwarts when he was a student there and has had his wand thus since snapped in half. The punishment for expulsion means having your wand, this really personalized and perhaps sentient creature, snapped in half. We and Harry learns that Hagrid isn't supposed to be using magic, but he does, and we suspect Dumbledore is behind this. So after the briefest, most wonderful taste of this magical world, and after Hagrid has witnessed some of the neglect and abuse that Harry is subject to, Harry is dropped back off at the Dursleys and is expected to wait out the rest of the summer there before he is meant to go to the train station and get on a train and go to Hogwarts. Semi-good news, things aren't as bad as they used to be because one, Harry does now have his own bedroom, and the Dursleys don't know that Harry isn't allowed to do magic outside of school, so they are terrified of him, and thus they don't abuse him any further. But what they do is completely ignore him and pretend he doesn't exist, which is called stonewalling and is also a form of emotional manipulation and or abuse. Harry asks for a ride to King's Cross Station. They begrudgingly oblige, and when they do get there, Harry says he needs to be dropped off at platform 9 3/4, and they're like, that's not a real platform, and then they drive away, thinking that Harry's going to be stranded and not get to his new school at all. Newly 11-year-old Harry has a bit of a panic because he has a ticket to his new life, instructing him to board this magic train to this magic school, but he can't find the platform, and he starts to panic because he thinks he's about to miss out on this new life because of a goddamn logistical error. Come on, Hagrid, perhaps could we have... And it is like, while Harry's relationship with Hagrid is developing, Hagrid does bring up, he's like, oh, I can't believe you don't know about that. And, oh, wow, I can't believe you don't know about that. And so we're supposed to believe that this is like, whatever. It's just an error. So clock is ticking closer to departure time, and he only makes it because he overhears the Weasley family running late to board platform 9 3/4. So it's only because the Weasleys were running late that we have a story at all. Harry is immediately acquainted with Fred, George, Percy, Ron, Jenny, and Mrs. Weasley. He takes them immediately. They are kind and rambunctious and teasing and compassionate and real. On Harry's first train ride to Hogwarts, he is further acquainted with Ronald Weasley, or Ron Weasley, the youngest of 6 Weasley boys and the 6th of 7 children. Ron is unable to purchase any sweets from the candy trolley and is pretty immediately mocked for his hand-me-down robes. We get another mention of poverty, or a glimpse into what impoverishment looks like in the wizarding world and what class status can mean as a parallel to blood status. It's implied that the Weasleys don't have enough money for their large family. Arthur Weasley, Ron's dad, works for the Ministry of Magic, the government of the wizarding world. His job is to head, so he's the top, he's some sort of department chair of the Office for Misuse of Muggle Artifacts. This is a largely bureaucratic, unrespected job due to its lack of prestige and the requirement of studying and understanding relatively mundane Muggle life. But it's not mundane to Arthur. He's obsessed with Muggles and the things that they do or don't do and the tools that they have or don't have. Harry can in part immediately empathize with Ron's situation. Harry harbors no prejudice or superiority over anyone considered less than by people of status or regarded as elite. Harry immediately purchases one of everything off the sweets trolley cart, and the two boys' friendship is forged in sugar and mutual understanding pretty immediately. Ron and Harry then meet Hermione on the train. She's helping Neville look for his lost toad, and they immediately do not like her. They think she's a know-it-all. They think she's a little rude. She's kind of abrasive. Hey, we've all been there. She recounts that she's already read and memorized the entirety of their course catalog, and she confides that she feels behind because both her parents are Muggles. They're dentists. And also, though, if you at 11 received your Hogwarts letter and found out that you are in fact a witch capable of magic, and that there was a bunch of history, lore, guidance, and practice as it relates to enhancing these previously undiscovered skills, who you are, who your people are, studying probably probably wouldn't seem the challenge that Ron and Harry are going to make it out to be for approximately the next 7,000 pages. It's after meeting Hermione that Ron informs Harry someone attempted to rob Gringotts, the wizarding bank that Harry and Hagrid had visited only a month prior. The Daily Prophet reports that the attempt was unsuccessful, but it sends a jolt through Harry. Later, Harry will learn that that attempted break-in actually happened on the very same day that him and Hagrid were at Gringotts, and the vault that they attempted to break into had been emptied, and that it was indeed Vault 713. Toward the end of the train ride, Malfoy again attempts to befriend Harry, this time with the knowledge of who he is. Draco has been unabashed in his willingness to spout bigotry. Draco bullies Ron, says some disparaging things. And Harry says, thanks but no thanks. I'll make my own friends. And then Draco literally threatens Harry. He says, if you're not more polite, you'll go the way of your parents. That is a death threat. Smile more. Draco Malfoy does not only come from a family of pureblood supremacists, but he also comes from ancestral lineage of people that have routinely been sorted into Slytherin House. Slytherin, it is well known, Slytherin House is a thin allegory for the Nazi Party, and it parallels greatly to that of the Confederacy. So let's talk about the Hogwarts houses. So each student, upon admittance to Hogwarts, when they initially enter the dining hall for the first time, are sorted in front of their classmates into one of 4 houses. Those houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin, and Ravenclaw. It is theorized that the sorting hat sorts these children not based on personality, but based on their value system. So the main 2 values attributed with Gryffindor are courage and justice, with Hufflepuff, harmony and compassion, with Ravenclaw, intellect and learning, and with Slytherin, ambition and prestige. An excellent example, my partner and I recently locked ourselves out of our home, and my partner immediately said, well, guess we have to break a window. I said, excuse me. I said, maybe let's look around for a key. We did not find a key, but we did find a way in that was also very Ravenclaw-esque that I won't share with you for personal security reasons. My partner is obviously, let's say it together, Gryffindor. I'm going to make a bold claim here and say that Gryffindors are cool kids. I recently had a long-form debate with somebody wherein I took the position that Harry himself is not a cool kid. He's regarded as knobbly kneed, skinny, he typically looks askance, he is regularly picked on, and because we're inside his head, we know he never feels a sense of true belonging within the school itself, due to the continuously life-threatening circumstances and the enormous amount of imposter syndrome that comes with entering a world and being told that you are the chosen one. I stand corrected. This is my official apology for that take, because I believe Harry and his atypical popularity is what garnered a lot of the initial love for the series. What a dream, right? As a somewhat outcasted kid that can't necessarily figure out how to make friends, you show up to this amazing and warm boarding school world wherein you are already famous for being the most heroic person of your time. You're immediately put on the sports team. You become the youngest jock in the history of that school. And you're also inexplicably talented at this sport, despite the fact that you've never been a jock or you don't have the jockly stature or whatever. Jocks are regarded as cool on their worst days and revered for their wins on their best days. I think Harry's jockness is actually meant to symbolize a chosen one prophecy, because being a jock and being on a sports team, particularly in the position that Harry is in, we will discuss Quidditch in a second, is to ultimately be a conduit for people to place their hope in. We root through ourselves by rooting for you. Pressure, sure, and validation aplenty. It's a lovely fantasy wherein you are ordinary and unlovable one day, and the next, you're not only special, but the most special and most necessary person in the entire world. More than that, you have friends and you have been sorted into a space wherein a higher and unexplainable power has decided that you belong in. You belong in this group of individuals, and I mean just like lovely. Particularly because before these books were movies, this was something that could only be accessed by the children readers of the world. The world building around these books was really, really well done, and it was something that was sort of exclusive to readers. Immediately, Dumbledore is established as a moral authority in this series. he is also a Gryffindor. And Harry as his protege, an enactor of justice, a powerful young wizard, lacking just the wisdom and experience to truly discern right from wrong, but with correct intentions. We're pretty much always meant to agree with Harry as the reader, which makes his placement in Gryffindor house and a real absence of true representation from the other houses the implied favorite of the author. Harry, seated underneath the Sorting Hat, is told by the Sorting Hat, or the powers that be, that he would do just as well in Slytherin. He asks for Gryffindor. Same thing. Ron very much hopes to be placed in Gryffindor because that's where all of his brothers have been placed before him. If each of these kids is choosing Gryffindor, it implies that Gryffindor's main values are always choices. Courage always being a choice in a way that intellect is perhaps not. It's also theorized that each of our main characters is actually meant to represent one of the other Hogwarts houses. And I've gone back and forth about which of these characters might represent each of the Hogwarts houses, because obviously you're going to be inclined to say that Hermione represents Ravenclaw, but I actually think that that might be the reverse. I think Ron is meant to represent Ravenclaw and Hermione meant to represent Hufflepuff. We'll dive into those reasons later, obviously. Regardless, Rowling is linking courage and morality, and thereby the inverse, immorality or injustice and cowardice. Also choices. She's saying you always get to choose who you get to be. It's not a coincidence then that the characters of Slytherin House are meant to represent the Nazi Party and also parallel to that of the Confederacy. They believe and espouse the racial doctrine of that of Nazis in World War II. All of the characters that we meet from Slytherin House are meant to demonstrate an insecurity, an ignorance, and a fearfulness. We do not look up to them as readers, and we scrutinize their hypocrisy. They are constantly assuring us that they are the strongest due to their most pure blood, and yet they always back down from the fight, or just flat out lose the fight. Slytherin House values ambition above all, breeding a sort of selfishness and ego-driven character. It really begs the question, why is Slytherin House allowed to exist in a school that is otherwise relatively diverse blood-wise? I don't know. Pansy Parkinson is the only Slytherin girl we meet throughout the entirety of the series, and her name is literally Pansy. Though, fun fact, I just learned from the book Atmosphere that a pansy is actually a really tough and resilient flower. So I don't know if that's the point that Rowling is trying to make, but Slytherin is basically the Confederacy. All right, Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws are the unnoticed siblings to Slytherin's middle child syndrome and Gryffindor's golden child. They go about their business learning and growing and tending to books and animals and being of service to the plot when JKR needs them. Like, hello, write me that book. That's where I want to be. So needless to say, Harry is sorted into Gryffindor House, but not necessarily because that's where the Sorting Hat believes he should be. Like I said, the Sorting Hat tells Harry he'd be just as great in Slytherin, and we know why that is. But 11-year-old Harry is terrified to hear that. So when you couple the resentment and abuse that he experienced in the Dursley home with confirmation that he may be more like the bully that he has just met, it cements in Harry this idea that he may not be good, or that he may be capable of evil. It also illuminates for young readers the duality of light and darkness existing inside of each of us, even morally superior Harry. And thus, one is always capable of choosing goodness, justice, and the light. Also, before the feast concludes, Dumbledore warns all students to stay out of the Forbidden Forest because it is in fact forbidden, and they tell students to avoid the third floor corridor on the right-hand side, which is vague as shit for a castle, I will say. This is a castle, unless they wish to experience a very painful death, which Harry, who is coming from the education system of the UK, is a little bit surprised to hear. So Harry is sorted and he goes to his classes, and we get to explore this new magical world. This first book was originally published in 1997, and of course it's problematic, right? It's actually positive that it's somewhat problematic because it indicates that we've grown as a society. We have a new understanding of what is just and what is right and what is not okay. One of the more talked about issues within this series is the concept of genetically superior and inferior species. We don't get a lot of explanation as it relates to the distinction of a creature versus a character and their worth and personhood in this way. Some people criticize this as inherent hypocrisy that exists within the series, whereas others recognize it as a writing tool designed to parallel the injustices of present day, or what was present day, to the magical world, and also to again demonstrate that nuance that characters are capable of fighting for what they believe is right and good and just, while also perpetuating prejudice and harm amongst people that they maybe even care for. It becomes challenging to credit the latter, though, because the author is so clearly unwilling to acknowledge her own intrinsic biases and perhaps even her mistakes. As a white woman, it's highly likely that I will be offensive at some point in time, unknowingly and accidentally miss something really important, or perhaps accidentally utilize racist rhetoric, be complicit in microaggression. That is bound to happen because I have benefited greatly from the privilege of white skin. That's not what condemns JKR as an artist. It's her unwillingness to hear that feedback and do anything about it, right? The only reason she's receiving that feedback is because she has a fan base that is hurt and looking to clarify. Did you intentionally mean to attack us when you said that? In any conversation, any long-standing relationship, we are bound to hurt each other, and it's important that we can acknowledge those things with one another so that we can move forward. If JKR had been willing to be educated and come out with profuse apologies and maybe even dedicated some of her enormous wealth toward helping the trans community, I don't know that anyone would be taking the second look at these books that we are right now. We certainly wouldn't be boycotting her work. What I mean to say to white cis people specifically is we gotta be strong enough to hear when we've done something wrong, like when we've said something transphobic or racist, and we have to be willing to change our behavior if you care about whom you've hurt. It's frustrating when the conversation turns to the offender's personhood. I'm not racist and thus I must be incapable of racism is an entirely flawed argument, or I am not racist and thus my racist acts must be excused, is wrong. It's simply wrong. Your prior actions don't have to be a reflection of who you are, but they will be if you prove yourself unwilling to listen and change. In fact, centering yourself in a conversation wherein someone has taken the time and has been vulnerable enough to educate you in the way that you may be doing harm or damage, making it about the offense that you feel or becoming defensive is proving that you do not care about the well-being of the person that you've hurt or the community that you've hurt. So let's talk about Snape. Snape. So the baby dadification of Severus Snape truly eludes me. It does. I believe in part that it's due to the fact that Snape is played by the legendary Alan Rickman in the films. Severus Snape is Hogwarts potion master and head of Slytherin House. It is known that he covets the defense against the dark arts position at the school, and the children of the school believe that he has not been appointed to this position because Dumbledore, their headmaster, believes it would be too tempting for him. He'd be tempted to return to his old ways because Snape was formerly a Death Eater. Death Eater is the name that the Pure Blood Supremacy Group has given themselves, aka one of Tom Riddle's, aka one of Lord Voldemort's right-hand men. So currently, the defense against the dark arts position is held by Professor Squirrel, who is constantly stuttering and wears a turban. Dumbledore has allowed Snape back into the Hogwarts fold because Dumbledore believes he is repentant. Throughout the entirety of the series, we are told that if we trust Dumbledore, we have to trust Snape. I'll remind you that Lily and James Potter are canonically 21 years old when they are murdered. Snape was a former classmate of Lily and Potter's, and thus has a history with both that is vast and deep. Before we can get into it, we have to remind ourselves it's only been 11 years, so Snape is supposed to be 32 years old. In fact, everyone that you meet in the Order is supposed to be in their early 30s. And I think that the casting in the movies, though I love it for its own reasons, is incorrect in a lot of ways on that front, and it changes a lot of what the messaging is. Like, the youth of the characters, I think, is really relevant. Because we know he's 32 during the happenings of this book, I actually think it makes his behavior less excusable. Snape will spend the next 5 books bullying Harry Potter, and I don't think there's any excuse for it. Readers and viewers alike will know that one of the big reveals in this series is that Snape was formerly in love with Lily Potter, excusing her alone of her mudblood deficiency. Snape was in Slytherin House, came from a pureblood supremacist family, and found himself friend-zoned by Lily when they were classmates, and was horrified to see her begin to date and eventually marry and have kids with his own high school bully. So we learn that Harry's dad bullied Snape. Now, I gotta say, if the guy you friend-zoned spent your orphan son's entire adolescence punishing him for the fact that you didn't love him, would that redeem him? We will obviously have this deeper discussion, but personally, I do not think so. I think when Snape's suffering is revealed to us, we forgive him because he's a man and we have a tendency to infantilize men under patriarchy. Snape is responsible for far more suffering than he experiences. And I'm not saying that that makes him unforgivable. I'm saying that he does not apologize. And while he's supposed to be in this reformed space, he sure does go to lengths to hurt Harry in ways that matter throughout the entire course of the series. So Snape is so antagonistic toward Harry that Harry believes throughout every book that Snape is still a Death Eater and is undoubtedly responsible for all/any bad happenings that take place over the course of the book. Harry is gaslit left and right. He is 11 years old. Snape's disdain for Harry is so obvious that Hermione also starts to believe that at one point in time, Snape is trying to kill Harry. He is 11 years old. Okay, so let's talk about Quidditch really quick. As it relates to plot, Malfoy accidentally reveals for Harry that Harry is incidentally amazing at Quidditch. He is an intuitive and efficient flyer, and this prompts McGonagall to admit Harry to the Gryffindor Quidditch team. First years aren't allowed to have brooms, first years aren't allowed to play Quidditch, but an exception is made for Harry because he's just that good. McGonagall actually buys Harry the latest and greatest broom on the market, to the great envy and joy of all around. Okay, quick Quidditch rundown. There are 2 beaters, 3 chasers, 1 keeper, and 1 seeker. There's 7 people on a Quidditch team. The seeker's job, the position that Harry has been slated for, is to remain on the peripheral of the game and to hunt for the golden snitch. The game ends when the snitch is caught by the seeker because the snitch is worth 150 points. Whoever catches the snitch doesn't necessarily win the game, but does get this huge influx of points, and thus it's also Harry's job to keep an eye on the score and to only catch the snitch when 150 points would result in their winning. So that's more complicated than it needs to be, I would say, but that's what it is. Otherwise, there are, like I said, 3 chasers, and what they are doing is aiming the quaffle, the wizarding ball, into one of the 3 goalposts that the keeper is guarding to score points in 10-point increments. The 2 beaters have bats. And they are meant to protect their own chasers and keeper from the animated bludger balls that are flinging themselves at all the team members. Make sense? Great. Go. By the way, I just thought I'd mention that boys and girls do play on the same Quidditch team. It's never even mentioned. It's never even brought up. It's not even a big deal. No one even talked about it. No one even talked about it. So Harry learns that his father was also a Gryffindor seeker. It's the first piece of heritage he's ever had the chance to take part in. He plays in his first game and he's very nervous and he is so small, but he wins the match for his team by catching the golden snitch in his mouth. Not without a few hiccups though, because during the Quidditch match, someone bewitches Harry's broom in an attempt to sabotage him during his first match, and Hermione thinks it's Snape who's sitting right next to Professor Quirrell. She can see him muttering some incantation, and so she sets his robe on fire, which seems to release Harry from the charm, and thus he is able to catch his first golden snitch in his mouth. Later in the book, Harry is challenged to a midnight duel by Draco Malfoy. Ron agrees to show up as Harry's second, despite the fact that leaving the Gryffindor common room after hours is very much against the rules and could result in their expulsion. Hermione intercepts the 2 boys, convinces them that it's a terrible idea to go to this meeting and that it's likely a setup, but ultimately eventually accompanies them. It becomes clear that Malfoy had set Harry up to be caught, having reported him to Filch and Mrs. Norris. Filch is the squib/caretaker of the castle, and he seems to really hate children. Squibs are people born into magical families that never develop magical powers. We grow to develop a little bit of empathy and compassion for Filch as we gain insight into his feeble attempts to learn magic. Many have pointed to squibs as an allegory for disability. The worst, hardest, most backbreaking jobs in this castle are assigned to the only person in the castle that can't use magic to assist him. Why does Filch need to be cleaning the hallways by hand? Filch's lot in life seems to have led him to some pretty extreme resentment, and we typically see him siding with and aiding whichever antagonist each respective book focuses on. So in the first one, it's Malfoy. When the children uncovered that this has all been a trap, that Malfoy didn't really want to duel Harry, the three non-friends flee and eventually happen upon Neville, who's been wandering around the halls of the castle because he can't find his way back and he can't remember the password to their common room, and eventually accidentally uncover the corridor they're meant to be avoiding at all costs. And I chalk that up to Dumbledore's vague ass language and perhaps not locking down the room with the most important item in the whole series. So they've accidentally broken into the top secret hiding place being guarded by a three-headed dog named Fluffy. They narrowly escape and return to the common room, and Hermione admonishes them for being dumb because they didn't notice that Fluffy was standing on an enormous trapdoor. These crazy kids. So 2 months have passed since Harry has entered Hogwarts. He's joined the Quidditch team, he's loaded with homework, and it's after the now famous Wingardium Leviosa scene that Hermione, still friendless and a bit of a social pariah despite her adept conquering of all things magical, overhears Ron complaining to Harry about how awful he thinks Hermione is, saying that there's a reason she doesn't have any friends, like blah, blah, blah. This leads to Hermione skipping several classes, and she's reported to be crying in the girls' bathroom during the very exciting and wonderful Hallowe'en Feast. Harry and Ron feel a little bit of discomfort about this. They can't help but feel a little bit responsible for the fact that she's not enjoying the festivities, when suddenly Professor Quirrell comes running into the dining hall, screaming about how there's a troll loose in the castle. All the students are ordered back to their corridors. Harry and Ron worry for Hermione, who was last seen crying in the very corridor that the troll seems to be released. So they stow away, they find the troll, and with the help of Hermione and through magic and quick wit, they are able to defeat the troll in the girls' bathroom. Harry routinely is forgetting that he's a wizard. When all three of these kids are discovered by McGonagall, Hermione covers for them, lying about why she was troll prey and thus cementing their friendship, because they're like, she's not too uptight about rules now, maybe we can all be friends. And another point that seems to be demonstrated here, which I think is really interesting, is that one, it's pretty clear that Hermione is a stand-in for JKR, and a lot of Hermione's character arc, which we will explore, is about her relationship with rules and all or nothing thinking. A piece of what makes Hermione unlikable is that she is so smart and so advanced and so ahead of her peers. And I think that that gives us a lot of insight into JKR. It creates a sort of barrier around a certain type of person when it comes to critical feedback. JKR can dismiss any criticism under the guise of I am unliked because I'm too smart and I care about the rules too much. And that's simply not the truth. That's not what's going on here. But it does create a sort of cognitive dissonance between a person and the rest of the world if you get to decide that you can explain away all feedback because no one understands you because you're so smart. Another thing that feels relevant here is one of Ron's older brothers, Percy, has been selected as head boy, and it's something that he's really excited about. There's only one head boy and head girl in each house, so that means there's only 4 head boys in the entirety of the school. It's quite an honor to be selected. And in the Weasley family, one of the things that Ron grapples with that we will talk about is trying to find your own individuation and personality amidst a family that's already quite noteworthy. So Percy's very proud to be head boy. And even in this moment with the troll, Rowling, through the rhetoric she employs, seems to be poking fun at Percy, seems to be saying he sucks and he's a loser because he cares that he's been selected as head boy and is taking that job very seriously. It's interesting to me that the personal development of these characters and what will eventually deem them palatable or unpalatable from the reader's perspective is about their relationship with the rules and whether or not they care about them. And that will become very, very important when we watch Percy's plotline, which is to side with the rules in the Ministry of Magic even when it's been overtaken by corruption. Hermione has proven that she can be a little fast and loose with the rules, and the boys come to recognize her as an asset, and this cements their friendship. I don't love it, but it's fine. Let's talk about Snape's suspicious activities really quick. It's clear clear that Snape's leg is wounded after the troll incident, and Harry wrongly concludes that Snape must have attempted to break into the trapdoor guarded by Fluffy and thus acquired this wound, attempting to steal the Philosopher's Stone, which Hagrid accidentally let slip was the thing that he retrieved from the vault and is thus what is being guarded by Fluffy. Harry gets detention a number of times, and he is usually behind on homework, and as a reader, I find that quite stressful. One of the times he gets detention, he is tasked with going into the Forbidden Forest, and him and Malfoy are sent off in a pair. And the reason they're in the Forbidden Forest is because someone has been murdering unicorns and seemingly drinking their blood, and to kill a unicorn is about the most horrible thing you can do because they're apparently the most innocent creature that exists in our entire universe. Harry and Draco actually do come upon some sort of creature that is drinking unicorn's blood, drinking the silver blood from the unicorn's neck. I guess unicorn blood is meant to give its drinker the essence of life. It's not going to sustain you for very long. You're going to have to keep drinking it, and it's not worth the cost on your soul to stay alive, is how most people feel. Harry and Draco are sort of like saved by centaurs, and there's much about that we will discuss as well. And we get this conversation between centaurs about letting Harry Potter ride on the centaur's back, and a little bit of indication as to how centaurs have been abused and oppressed by humans in the past. More on that later. Let's talk about Christmas. JKR has been criticized for inclusion of Christmas in the series, simply because it doesn't make any sense. Why would the Wizarding World celebrate Christmas? Namely because Jesus' miracles wouldn't seem at all miraculous to them. Water into wine. McGonagall turns a desk into a pig, literally on page 100. And also, the rest of the series seems to be really absent of religion. It seems to include the holiday not because it's important to the characters or the plot at all, but because JK Rowling celebrates Christmas. Harry and Ron and the rest of the Weasley gang are staying at Hogwarts over Christmas. Arthur and Molly are visiting Charlie in Romania, and Harry is pumped for what is sure to be his best Christmas yet. He wakes on the morning of to find gifts of chocolates, a sweater knitted personally by Molly Weasley, 50 pence from the Dursleys, a flute handcrafted by Hagrid, and also an invisibility cloak with a vague note. Harry immediately uses the invisibility cloak to sneak into the restricted section of the library at night. I love it. He's looking for information on Nicholas Flamel, and Nicholas Flamel's the inventor of the Philosopher's Stone, which is rumored to have aided Flamel in living forever. He is currently some 800 years old. The three students believe that it's their responsibility to figure out what Fluffy is guarding, why he's guarding it, and who's trying to get it, because clearly the bad guys have infiltrated the house in the form of Snape. So they believe it's now their responsibility to guard the stone, and they can't guard the stone until they know why they're guarding the stone. And so they have to sneak into the restricted section of the library in order to find out this information. And so Harry is able to do so. He has more understanding of Nicholas Flamel, and he now has a means to walk around the castle at night. And what's really interesting about this is obviously in this first book, we get two Hallows. This Hallow that Harry is engaging with is meant to represent the morality of his ancestors. What's interesting about it is there's that old philosophical question, if you could fly or be invisible, which would you pick? And it's supposed to mean something about the answerer's personality if they choose invisibility, because you don't have to be invisible to do anything good, right? Like, you don't have to hide yourself. You don't have to remove yourself from being perceived if you're not going to do something a little bit shady. And so it's just an interesting kind of flip. We'll talk about the Hallows. I know, I'm just laying the groundwork. Okay, because Harry can now walk around the castle at night, one of these night walks, when he's hiding from Mrs. Norris, because he's not sure if Filch's cat can see through the invisibility cloak or sense him underneath it, he finds himself in front of the Mirror of Erised, which is just the word desire spelled backwards. When he looks in the Mirror of Erised, what he sees is himself surrounded by family that loves him. And so he imagines that the Mirror of Erised is a portal to somewhere else, or it's allowing him to see his dead loved ones who are currently crowded around him, showering him with love and support. The next night, he drags Ron out of bed to come and meet his family, but when Ron stands in front of the mirror, he doesn't see family at all. When Ron looks in the mirror, he sees himself as head boy. He sees himself as responsible for winning the Quidditch Cup. up. He sees himself outshining his elder brothers and finally making a name for himself in his family, a near impossible feat due to the clever and talented brothers that have come before him. Ron grapples with identity throughout the course of the entirety of the series, no longer just the youngest Weasley boy, but now also as best friend of Harry Potter. It's important for us to remember throughout the course of the series that Ron is a strategist. He can see a few moves ahead, and that is why he's so important to this triad of heroes. Harry suspects something different is up with the mirror than he originally understood because of what Ron is able to see inside of it, and so they leave, and when Harry comes back to look in the mirror again, filled with longing and the absence of loved ones in his life and wanting and needing affection and care, he meets Albus Dumbledore for the first time. Albus Dumbledore explains to Harry that he will be hiding the mirror and taking it away because really good men have wasted their lives in front of it. Because the mirror doesn't just show you what you want, it shows you your deepest and most profound desire. So Harry, who has never known family in front of it, sees himself surrounded by it. Ron, who has always been overshadowed, finds himself standing alone. Dumbledore warns Harry not to look for the mirror again. They have a pleasant interaction. Harry does not get punished for being out and about in the castle at night, because we come to find that it is in fact Dumbledore who returned Harry's cloak to him. And Harry asks Dumbledore what he sees in the mirror, and Dumbledore looks in the mirror for a moment and says he sees himself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. When Harry climbs back in bed that night, he suspects that maybe Dumbledore was not truthful. The rest of the book is about Harry, Ron, and Hermione trying to protect the stone. Something that's running behind all of this, the kids eventually learn through their visits with Hagrid. Hagrid's drinking problem is brought up also throughout the course of the series, and it is Hagrid who one night, when overindulging at a pub, trades a secret for the dragon's egg of a Norwegian ridgeback dragon. So Hagrid has traded the secret of how to get Fluffy to stop guarding the trapdoor for his very own dragon's egg. There's a lot of chaos that takes place because of this, but it does move the plot forward. And Norbert, the Norwegian ridgeback, will be okay and he will be taken to safety. I don't want you to worry about him. But it leads us to understand, it leads Hagrid to disclose that the way to get past Fluffy is just to play him a tune. Playing any sort of music will result in Fluffy going to sleep. Hagrid had given Harry a handmade wooden flute for Christmas, and so the kids have intention to use that wooden flute to get past Fluffy. So when the kids think the Sorcerer / Philosopher's Stone is under imminent threat and it's going to be stolen by Snape, who they understand to have this dark past, they decide to do something about it. They get past Fluffy, who's already asleep when we get there, and what Dumbledore has done is had a bunch of Hogwarts professors has set up traps toward the stone to safeguard the stone. And the reason he's done that is so that no one person will have knowledge as to how to get through all the traps. But because there's 3 of them, each have a very individual skill set, they are able to maneuver through the traps quite seamlessly, despite the fact that they are first years. One of the traps is Devil's Snare Herbology. One of the traps is a set of flying keys that Harry has to use his broom to acquire. And one of the traps is just a logic puzzle, which I really appreciate. There's also the very infamous chess game. Ron is a strategist. He's amazing at wizard chess. In the event, Ron has to sacrifice himself so that Harry and Hermione can move forward, which is perhaps a bit of foreshadowing. Ultimately, this series of traps leads Harry to come face to face with the person attempting to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and that person is none other than Professor Quirrell. It's a really big reveal, truly terrifying to read this in the book. It's done really well in the movie, but it's even scarier in the book. Quirrell turns around and unwinds his turban to reveal that the back of his head has Lord Voldemort's face coming out of it, and ultimately we are made to understand that Voldemort has taken possession of Quirrell's body while he was on an Aurora mission the summer before, and has been sort of puppeteering him to get Quirrell to do what Voldemort needs to come back to life. And Voldemort believes that if he has the Philosopher's Stone, which has given Nicholas Flamel access to extreme longevity, he will be able to animate his body again. I don't know what he plans to do with it, honestly. We learned that it was Quirrell drinking the unicorn blood in the Forbidden Forest, and then Harry once more comes face to face with the Mirror of Erised. Dumbledore has hidden the Sorcerer's Stone inside of the Mirror of Erised, but bewitched it so that only someone who has no intention to use it for personal gain is able to take it. So when Harry looks in the Mirror of Erised, at that moment, he feels the stone thunk into his pocket via magic and not a ton of logical understanding on my part. When Quirrell, instructed by Voldemort from the back of his head, is told to take the stone from Harry, he's unable to touch Harry, and he experiences like a burning sensation. And Voldemort once again threatens Harry's life and says if he doesn't hand over the stone, he'll go the way of his parents. Harry demonstrates a lot of bravery throughout the entirety of the year, and honestly the entirety of his life, but it all comes to a head when Quirrell and Voldemort are attempting to seize Harry. Voldemort is shouting instruction at Quirrell, and Quirrell is doing his best to try to hurt Harry and take the stone from him. But when Quirrell's hands meet the skin of Harry, they both feel an enormous, outrageous, searing pain, and then Harry blacks out. Harry wakes up to Dumbledore standing over him and saying that he's been unconscious for 3 days, that Quirrell does not have the stone, that these 3 11-year-olds were successful and once again thwarting the plot of the Dark Lord. Dumbledore says the effort it took Harry to keep the stone from Quirrell and Voldemort and to endure Voldemort's touch nearly killed him. It's a miracle that he survived, and Dumbledore has arrived just on time. He also tells Harry that the stone has been destroyed, and Harry worries for Nicholas Flamel what will happen to him now, and Dumbledore says that Flamel and his wife are comfortable with the 800 years that they've been alive, and that they recognize it as their duty and responsibility to see the stone destroyed because it's too dangerous should it fall into the wrong hands. Dumbledore also tells Harry that he shouldn't be afraid of the name Voldemort. A through line throughout the entirety of the book are people being unwilling to say Voldemort's name for fear that he should be evoked by it. Speak of the devil and he doth appear, so to speak. But Dumbledore tells Harry that the fear of a name only increases the fear of the thing itself. Dumbledore tells Harry that it's very important to acknowledge and name the problematic and terrifying things going on in our lives in an effort to be able to understand them and thus subvert them. It's actually challenging to read these books and watch these movies right now because we don't have a chosen one, and things aren't looking amazing. We might be at the top. We might be right before the Potters are murdered. We don't even have a prophecy at this point. But what we do have is information and instruction. We have history to look to. Ultimately, Harry Potter is just history made fantasy. And if we can look to our history books to understand what is required of us now, it may make it easier to fight the darkness rather than relegating ourselves to submission and end of times rhetoric. The book ends with Harry, Ron, and Hermione and Neville being afforded a bunch of points for the Wizarding House Cup, and thus Gryffindor wins the Wizarding House Cup, even though it looked like they were really going to lose there for a second. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are responsible for them losing a bunch of points. The House Cup is this thing that all the houses are competing in when a student answers a question correctly, performs a spell, does outrageously well on a test, is observed by a professor or any sort of authority figure doing something impressive. That person's house is awarded points. So Hermione is responsible in class for a lot of the points we see Gryffindor accumulating. However, the same is true in the reverse. So if an authority figure decides to dock your house points for interrupting, speaking out of turn, or not knowing an answer, your entire house will lose points too. And Harry, Ron, and Hermione have been responsible for the deduction of many points that House Gryffindor has lost. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are a little bit socially ostracized toward the end because it is actually their fault for sneaking out of bed at night that they aren't going to win the House Cup. Dumbledore gets up right before he's meant to announce the winner of the House Cup. He affords Ron, Harry, and Hermione a bunch of points, and also Neville a bunch of points, because sometimes standing up to your friends that think they're doing what's right when you know what they're doing is wrong takes the most act of courage. So Gryffindor wins the House Cup. Hooray. They get their exam results, they all board the train, and they all go back to their lives for the summer, and Harry and Ron promise to write. And that's very pertinent information as it relates to the opening of the next book. So I know this video was me opening a lot of doors and closing literally none of them, but the truth is that's what a good series does. I really do live for the implications. I think it's imperative that we are examining all the literature that we are consuming and all the media that we are digesting. It doesn't mean that everything that we read has to be good for us. It doesn't mean it all has to be educational. It doesn't mean we can't root for the anti-heroes at times. It just means that in times like this, when right and wrong feel very clear to many of us, and when our social fabric is more threatened than it has been since World War II, when American checks and balances and the laws and legislation that are meant to protect our sacred rights and freedoms are being more challenged than they have been in living history, it feels more important than ever to draw lines between our most beloved media and the truth about what's happening today. I wish I couldn't draw those lines. My name is Sage. Thank you so much for watching this roller coaster of a video. I promise we'll dive back into all of these concepts and we will shut the doors as the series does. I hope to see you next time. My name is Sage. Bye.